Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and welcome back to me talking about books that are popular on the internet. Yes, we're back, and this time we are reading another book that you, the readers, have chosen. So last time we read The Cruel Prince, and after that I said, hey, here's the poll, here are some options you can choose from, what do you want me to read next? And I'm a bit angry with you people because you people managed to choose the one book on that list that I was the least interested in reading and which was also the longest one. So today we are talking about The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. Disclaimer here before we dive into anything. I've read on some reviews that Carissa Broadbent supports Israel and is a Zionist, and I couldn't really find anything like official that really supports that. However, a couple of people have said that and have mentioned it. I just want to make that disclaimer here that first off, I didn't pay for this book, and if I had known that, I wouldn't have paid for this book because, you know, Free Palestine and all that. And if she really is a Zionist, I'm not supporting that in any way, shape, or form. Just as a disclaimer here. So today we are talking about another popular romantasy book. Because for some reason you people really like to see me suffer, don't you? So this one I have come across a couple of times here on Booktube, but also over on Bookstagram. And I have heard about it from people who have read it and mostly enjoyed it. And I mean, if we check out Goodreads here, on Goodreads, the book has an average rating of 4.34 with around 280,000 ratings. So that is pretty good. And it's not that this is Carissa Broadbent's like first fantasy book that's really popular. No, she has actually written another series that I have to check, the War of Lost Hearts series, which was also more of a darker romantasy series. But this one, The Serpent and the Wings of Night, which is the first book in a, of course, series, the Crown of Nyaxia series. This is her most popular book to date, like arguably way more popular than her other fantasy series. So people have been really gravitating towards this one. And you might wonder why. Well, of course, romantasy has always been a popular genre on the internet, especially on Booktok. It has a female heroine, it has a dark brooding love interest, and it's more on the quote-unquote darker side of fantasy, because this book deals with vampires. Hang on, we have a book about vampires? Ooh, okay, hang on, I need to change something. Now, that's the right outfit for this book. So yes, in this book, we are talking about vampires, and of course not the Twilight, sparky kind of vampires. Actually, I have to take this head off, it's really annoying. We're not talking about the sparkly Twilight kind of vampires, no. The vampires in this book are supposed to be dark and dangerous and bloodthirsty, which is unlucky because our main character is the only human. Well, actually, she isn't the only human in the world, but she's basically the only human that's in this story. So yes, vampires are in the mix with this one, and I have to admit, that was a reason for me to be excited, because who doesn't love vampires? I certainly do. Plus, what this book also does is Hunger Games. This book is basically Hunger Games with vampires. So the whole shtick this book is about is that we have a human girl who lives in a world conquered or ruled by vampires, and she enters a tournament to the death, and then it becomes all Hunger Gamesy, and of course on the side she meets a dark, mysterious, but handsome vampire man who she, of course, falls in love with at some point. So, as always, the structure for this review is going to be that I'm going to give you some brief general thoughts and opinions that I had while reading, just so you get a general idea of where this review is going. Then we are going to jump into the book. I'm going to take you through the entire story, chapter by chapter, as quickly or as slowly as I can, depending on how I feel. And then at the end, we'll do some conclusion analysis and review where I'll tell you some of my thoughts in more detail. But before we dive into this book, what is this book even about? What's the story? So here is a not at all sarcastic summary of what happens in The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I'm Vincent. I'm king of the vampires. I'm super powerful, ruthless, and no one will ever stand in my way. Oh, a human baby! I'll take her. I'm Oriah, and I'm a weak, inferior human who lives in a world that could kill me at any time because I'm not as powerful as vampires. I'm going to enter the Kajari, a tournament to the death for all vampires that I, as a human, am somehow allowed to enter. And if I win, I'll get my wish from the vampire queen to become a super powerful vampire. Oh, I wish you didn't have to enter this tournament of death. I'm so sorry I couldn't save your dead parents because they're dead when I found you, and I'm so sorry I can't give you your dead parents back. The tournament has begun, but oh no, I'm such a weak, inferior human. I'll never defeat those superior, strong vampires. Here, have some nice swords which hold an overpowered, fast-acting poison. Oh, and here you can have some healing potions too. Oh, and you can come talk to me any time during the tournament because somehow this is allowed. This trial of the tournament requires me to fight monsters and other competitors while I'm running through an arena. Hey, I'm Rain. I'm a super deadly vampire, but I did just save your life. So, do you want to come hang out with me and my friend? No! Please. Okay. Hi, I'm Misha. I'm the Sunshine character, and we're gonna be best friends. Let's go train together. Training montage. Fighting montage. Fighting montage. Training montage. This trial of the tournament requires me to fight monsters and other competitors while I'm running through an arena. Hey, I did just save your life again, so do you want to work together for the rest of the tournament? No. Please. Okay. Oh no, I got hurt badly in a terrorist attack. So, I guess I'm not gonna be in the rest of the book. Tell me what's going on. Nothing. Just vampire civil war. What? Gotta go. Oh no, I was wounded badly, but I'm gonna use it as an excuse so the two of us can get closer. This trial of the tournament requires me to fight monsters and other competitors while I'm running through an arena. So, I did save your life again. Do you want to come hang out with me at a vampire party? No. Please. Okay. How do we have so much spare time during a death tournament? This trial of the tournament requires me to fight monsters and other competitors while I'm running through an arena. Oh no, I was wounded badly, but I'm gonna use it as an excuse so the two of us can get closer. I'm not sure if this is a good idea. But I did save your life again, so, you wanna have sex with me? No. Please. Okay. I'm sorry about the whole vampire civil war thing that basically genocided an entire district containing 500,000 humans and vampires. There's no time for this. I have to quickly reveal my super tragic background story before we die in the final trial. This trial of the tournament requires me to fight monsters and other competitors while I'm running through an arena. I did basically save your life by letting you win, so kill me now. No. Please. Okay. What have I done? I've dated this man for 2 weeks. I can't let him die. I know. I'll give up my wish and make it so he's won the tournament instead of me. Hey, thanks. I didn't expect that. Oh, I'm so glad you're alive. I'm gonna go kill his stepdad now. What? Oh, and I'm the prince of the rebel vampires who basically started this whole vampire civil war. What? Oh, quick, before I die. You are actually my biological daughter and half vampire. What? Let's get married so I can keep you safe from my vampire rebel army, and we can rule together and make the world a better place. No! Okay. So this is what the story is about. Human girl, vampire world, tournament to the death, love, spice, betrayal. It's got it all. So what did I think of this book? Well, it wasn't great, but it also wasn't entirely terrible. So I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars, which means I didn't think it was that good. But considering what else we have talked about on this channel, the other books, previously Cruel Prince and Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, this book is not that bad in comparison. It's definitely not Fourth Wing level of bad, and I actually enjoyed Serpent and the Wings of Might a bit more than The Cruel Prince. So this isn't by any means great. This book has a lot of problems, mainly in the department of world building, character work, and just the general progression of the story. But what I have to compliment this book is definitely the writing style in general is a lot more enjoyable than what I got in Fourth Wing. Like, this book is actually readable, as in it didn't want to make me throw the book across the room, except once, but that's more because of a story point that happened and not because of the writing itself. Like, there are actually 1 or 2 lines in here that I thought actually sounded kind of good. That's not saying that this is perfect. Like, there certainly are problems within the writing style that we will talk about. For example, there is a lot of purple prose, there's a lot of repetition of certain things. So there are flaws within the writing, but in and of itself, I thought it was easy enough to read. It was actually kind of pleasant as well. Like, it was written well enough that I got through it quite quickly. Like, I finished reading this in about a week, which is quite fast for me when I read a book like this. All of the characters are, while not, super complex and detailed, none of them are, like, so outrageously stupid or abusive or whatever that I hated reading about them. Again, don't get me wrong, there are certain things about the characters where I'm like, why did you do that? That was not a good idea. But at least there are aspects to the characters where I was like, okay, I can actually kind of see why someone would really like these characters and why someone would root for the main couple in this book. Like, naturally, there's also a lot of romance in this book, and honestly, the romance isn't too bad. Like, I have to give props to the main love interest, to the guy, for not being a total asshole. Like, there's no abuse, there is no bullying. He actually apologizes for his behavior, and he very specifically asks for consent when they get intimate. And I know that's basically just normal, appropriate human behavior, but in this case, I feel like I have to highlight that, because we all know that's not always the case with, romantic interests in fantasy or in general romance adjacent books. The plot, while repetitive in certain ways and being a tad too long for my liking, was still okay. Like, it had a progression where I thought, okay, I can see someone really getting into this, getting into the world, getting into, this premise of the death tournament. And there was, like, rising tension, and honestly, the last couple of chapters of the book are probably the best ones when it's all about, the reveals and life and death and all that. Like, those were actually quite okay. And in general, there was a lot of potential that I could see within this book. Like, this book has a lot of potential in terms of, you know, what it tries to do, the world it sets out to describe, and especially what it like sets up at the end of this first book. I can totally see how this could be really, really interesting. And with this, I can kind of see at least why people would love this book. Again, I just think the execution of that potential, of the idea and of the characters is very, very mediocre. Like, there are hints and glimpses at something good, something exciting, something interesting, but it's just done in the most boring, non-exciting, uncreative way possible, where I get this frustration that I often have with popular books, where I'm like, the premise and the potential of this book are so good, and the story I'm coming up with in my mind while reading this is more interesting than what I'm actually getting on the page, and that shouldn't happen. Yeah, in general, it's okay with this. I can actually kind of see and understand why people would love this. Personally, I still think it's very mediocre, and honestly, even though I'm not a fan of the romantasy genre, this genre deserves better. You don't have to accept mediocrity like this. Like, if this is the best, or something like Fourth Wing, if that stuff like that is the best the romantasy genre has to offer, I refuse that. I refuse that this is the best the romantasy genre can do. You deserve better, fans of this genre. And if you get stuff like this, it's a good start, but we still need to do a bit more. So those are my general thoughts on the book, but that's enough of a preamble. Let's just jump into the book as I take you through the entire story of The Serpent and the Wings of Night. As always, don't get confused why I'm looking down here. That's why I'm keeping my notes. But now let's jump into it. We are starting the story with a prologue that is written in the third person. In this prologue, we are witnesses to an adoption, basically. So we encounter a little human girl around 3 years old. Like, she can't even really talk. And two dangerous vampire men, they find her. And those vampires have black featherless wings. So their wings, as far as I understood it, basically sort of look like an actual bat, like bat's wings. But before they can do anything to the child, the king of the vampires appears, the Hyaj king. So Hyaj is like one of the basically vampire types or vampire clans. And he shows up, and the narration just straight up tells us what kind of person he is. He was not the physically strongest vampire, he was not the fiercest warrior nor the wisest sage, but they said he was blessed by the goddess Nyaxia herself, and anyone who had ever met him would swear to be true. Power seeped from his every pore, and death stained his every breath. So this is Vincent, the current king of the vampires, and he basically scares those men off. And he looks at this little girl, and she tries to like sort of fight back. She bites his thumb, and then he gives her the nickname, "Ooh, you're like a little serpent." So that's sort of where we get that from. And he basically thinks, "Oh, I sort of see myself in this girl. She reminds me of myself." And then basically he like makes her fall asleep with vampire magic, and he decides to adopt this little girl, this little human girl, as his daughter. And it is said at the end of the prologue that this decision to adopt this human girl will one day topple an empire. So first impressions, not too bad. Like, this prologue is actually quite strong. It's short, precise, to the point. It sets the mood right away that we're in a, you know, sort of dark, dangerous world in which vampires rule. And we immediately meet our two of our main characters. So we meet Vincent, who is going to be our main character's stepdad, and we meet Oriah, who is the main character of this book. So this is pretty good. There are only like one or two things that are already evident in this early part of the book that will become much more of a thing later. So for example, this passage I just read to you, I was like, well, the book just basically straight up tells you who this guy is. That happens a lot throughout the book. Like, there's a lot of tell, don't show throughout this entire book, where we're just, as a reader, basically just told to our faces who this person is, like what their characteristics are, basically. Like, Oriah will constantly monologue about her own hopes and dreams, but also about, you know, who this person is that she's talking to, and it's never really, the narration never really tries to like be subtle. Like, I understand that sometimes you need to tell or not show, but there's never really an attempt made to just show characteristics or indicate certain inclinations via, you know, more subtle descriptions or emotional reactions to things. And no, we're just basically straight up told, this is who this person is, this is what their characteristics are, this is their background. That's it, deal with that. So that's sort of a problem. And something else that you didn't see here in this passage is M dashes. This author loves using M dashes, and I'm saying this now because they are everywhere. Like, in this prologue, in this short prologue alone, before chapter 1, there are already 11 M dashes. This entire book, and I'm not kidding you here, contains more than 1,000 M dashes. Like, it's around 1,200 when I searched for M dashes. And I'm like, why? Why would you, like, I understand it's a stylistic device. Sometimes you want to use it to emphasize something. Maybe it's the author's shtick to use it, but over 1,000 times? This book has around 500 pages. That's more than 2 M dashes per page. Like, what the hell? Why did an editor not pick up on this? And I'll tell you why right now. This book was originally self-published, and I don't have anything against self-publishing. If that's a route you want to take in your writing journey, kudos to you, and if it works out, great. The thing is, some things occasionally tend to like slip through the cracks with self-publishing, and some writers, I'm not sure, I don't know Carissa Broadbent, some writers make the mistake that when they self-publish, they think they can skip the professional editing, and you should never do that. An editor would have picked up on this and would have said, you know, maybe write a complete sentence, maybe throw out, I don't know, some 500 M dashes or something, because they're really distracting. Like, once you notice that she loves using them, you see them everywhere, and it's massively distracting. After this prologue, we jump into part 1, Dusk. And chapter 1, we are introduced now in first person to our main character who tells us a story, namely Oriah. She is now 23 years old, and she has grown up in the palace alongside Vincent as her stepdad. However, she's not currently at the palace. She is out. She is hunting for vampires that do bad things to humans, and she's out to kill them and to teach them a lesson. And she has like some cool daggers that are like which have like a poisonous blade, essentially. It's called Darinth. I have no idea how to pronounce it, and it's basically a fast-acting paralytic that helps her defeat the vampires. And if you're wondering at this point, hang on, isn't she like a normal human, and the vampires like rule the world because they're so much more superior and better in any way, shape or form? Yes. But don't worry about that. For some reason, Oriah is able to defeat and kill vampires left, right and center throughout the entire book. She will probably come back to it. Like, she'll always go on about, oh, I'm a weak human, the vampires are so much better than me, they are like far superior in strength, agility, I have no chance against them, like they're gonna kill me. And then she kills like a bunch of vampires in this book, like with ease. So that much for consistency. We get a little hint here already that she once killed a boy who was also a vampire that she was potentially in love with. Like that's like first hints are sort of thrown out here for her background story. And she basically then starts to monologue at us about her past, how she sees herself. She just goes on about, I protect the humans, but I never grew up with them. I don't really see myself as human. I have nothing in common with them. And look at them, like those humans that are so disgustingly weak. They're dragged down by their human flaws. But that's also my problem, because I still am, at the end of the day, also human, even though I don't see myself as human, but I'm also not a vampire, also not part of the vampire world. So she goes on a lot about that, she is herself human and has human flaws, but also doesn't see herself as part of the human world, but also doesn't really fully see herself as vampire. So it's sort of this in-between thing for her. And we also get a little description here on what she looks like, what she's wearing, just so you have sort of an idea. A day-to-day, I wore only black, plain clothing that attracted little attention and allowed me free range of movement. I didn't ever wear anything bright, as it would draw unwanted eyes, flowing, as it would allow someone to grab me, or restrictive, as it would impede my ability to fight or flee. I wore my leathers most of the time, even in the oppressive heat of the summer. They were protective and unobtrusive. Sure, maybe I admired pretty things just as much as any other, but I was surrounded by prejudice. Vanity came second to survival. So this is sort of a general idea of what, not only what Oriah looks like, but also what her tone of voice is like, what she's like. She's like, no fun, no nonsense. I live in this super dangerous world and I'm out to kill vampires. I'm super cool and kind of a little bit edgy. That's sort of the vibe you get a bit from her. So after killing a bunch of vampires, she goes back home and sneaks in through the servant entrance, and this is where we meet a character called Ilana. Ilana is an old human woman who works for Vincent, essentially, and we get the idea that Oriah and her are really good friends, and that Ilana has sort of helped raise her, so there's definitely like a close connection. And they talk a bit. We find out that Ilana, in order to survive, provides blood for vampires. Like she's basically a food donor to the vampires. And they talk a bit about what's going on in their lives. And here we get our first mention of the Kajari. The Kajari is basically this tournament to the death that we will find out more about later. And Ilana isn't really fond of the idea that Oriah wants to join this tournament, but of course Oriah is going to do it anyway, and she says, well, at least you make sure you get out of town, because it can get really dangerous once the tournament starts, and make sure you leave so you're safe. In chapter 2, she enters the palace and looks around, and she basically just tells us how cool this place looks. Here we have another problem that I have generally with these types of books. It was also a problem I had with The Cruel Prince and also Fourth Wing. There are not enough descriptions. Like, we're in this palace, but all we basically get from Oriah is, hey, this palace looks really cool and elegant and intricate. And I'm like, any details on the specific architecture? Something that would help me imagine the specific place, something that helps me distinguish this place from other places in the future, or something that would add to, the world building? Not really. Like, the descriptions in this book are very surface level, very bare bone, like, sort of enough so you can imagine, like, a general vibe, but nothing else. And I hate that this seems to be a thing with these types of books where the authors just refuse to, like, really go into descriptions of any kind. Like, it usually stays very vague in general, but there's never really an effort made to, like, really go into specific details, maybe because it would take too much effort. I don't know, but I think it would help not only with me as a reader helping to imagine what this place looks like, but also it would help with the world building. If you said, oh, this is what this architecture looks like, and then the architecture of this other place looks like this, and then you have distinguished places. Well, we don't really get this, so we're just in a fancy looking palace. Imagine whatever you want. And here we meet, or are rejoined by Vincent, who wants to have a little talk with Oriah before their training starts. And again, like through the dialogue and through the narration, through Oriah's monologuing, we're basically like constantly being like spoon-fed entire like background stories and info dumps. Like instead of showing like throughout the dialogue, we're just told, oh, Vincent did this and this when I was this and that years old. And I'm like, how is that relevant to the conversation right now? Are you just trying to find a way to put this in because you didn't know any better? Like what's the goal here? We talk a bit about, we get our first hint at that magic is a thing because they're about to like start their training, and Vincent's been trying to teach Oriah how to like harness her magic. And she basically says that she's tried to wield magic, but she isn't very good at it. The magic system is something I'll have to come back to, because the magic system follows no logical pattern, to be honest. Like, why is she able to do magic if it's supposedly only like a super duper vampire thing? Where do the magic powers actually come from? We'll come back to it later because we meet some other characters who also have magic powers, but just as a little hint here, the magic system in this is, just like the descriptions, very vague and basically gives us like one explanation, sort of, which doesn't apply to every character, so it doesn't really work everywhere. We'll find out here that Vincent, as the king of the vampires, is dealing with some other people, so we learn that among the different races of the vampires, we learn that there are basically two clans within, I think it's the Nightborn vampires. So Vincent is the king basically of them, and Vincent is, like I mentioned earlier, a Hayaj vampire, and the other clan of this specific race of vampires is called a Rishan, or Raishan, I think Rishan, the Rishan group of vampires, and they basically fight to rule over what's called the House of Night, so the Nightborn vampire rule. So that's a bit of info dumpy world building we'll get here. Does it go any deeper? Not much, but at least it's a little bit, and I'm taking everything that I can get. We get a bit more info on the Kijari, on the death tournament here. Basically, it is said that the goddess of all vampires, Nyaxia, basically organizes sort of this tournament to the death, which consists of 5 trials that take place over 4 months. And at the end of that tournament, there will only be one winner. Everyone else will die. And whoever wins is granted a wish from the goddess Nyaxia, like whatever that wish is. In fact, that's how Vincent got his power. Like, Vincent won the tournament 200 years ago, and he basically wished for enough power so he could become the king of the vampires. So here's where we learn basically what's sort of going to happen in the rest of the book. In chapter 3, we join a feast where Vincent basically just shows Oriah like some of the other vampires that might join the tournament, and basically says that's this person, that's their weakness, that's this person, that's their weakness. So here we get already some hints at who we might see later, and Oriah actually sees someone who she thinks looks rather odd, because she sees a man who looks at a specific painting that normally no one else in the palace looks at. So we go back into Oriah's chambers. We get a bit more of good old-fashioned internalized fantasy racism, where she's like, oh, I'm gonna be the weakest person in the tournament because I'm human, everyone else has an advantage over me. And I'm like, why is she allowed to enter in the first place as a human? Because it specifically said that this is a tournament by the goddess of vampires for vampires. So why the hell is she allowed to enter? This question is never raised by anyone. And Oriah is right when she goes on about that she shouldn't be here, that she's the least qualified person for this tournament, and that everyone can basically kill her at any time very easily. But I guess we're just running with it. She talks a bit more about Vincent, and Vincent goes on about, I wish when I found you, I wish I could have saved your parents. I wish I could have saved you earlier. I'm sorry they died. But I found you in a part of the country where I can't return to because of vampire civil war stuff. My question is, how was he allowed to go there in the first place when he found her? If he's not allowed to be there, doesn't matter. And if you're thinking, he goes on a lot about, your parents, I wish they weren't dead, I wish they weren't dead, I wish I could have saved them. Keep that in mind. Here we are told what Oriah's wish is. Her wish is essentially to become bonded to Vincent and to become a powerful vampire. So this is what she says. This would be my wish from Nyaxia if I won the Kajari, to become Vincent's Corite, his heartbound. A Coriatus bond was a powerful thing, verging on legendary, only granted a handful of times in history and only forged by Nyaxia herself. It would strip away my humanity, making me a vampire without the risks of turning, which ended in death more than half of the time, and it would bind my soul to Vincent, his power becoming mine and mine becoming his. So that's essentially what her wish is. Keep that in mind. She wants to become a powerful vampire who is bonded to Vincent, the Vampire King, so she can finally not be a weak human and have some agency. That's her wish. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to it at the very end of the book. Here I had some questions because I was like, why are you wishing to be bonded to Vincent like this? Why not just wish to become a really cool, badass, powerful vampire? Why are you not wishing for, I wish I was the vampire queen? Why is she not wishing for her family to still be alive and safe? There's so many other options to this. Why this specific, bond to another person, which makes it like codependent essentially? I don't know. So she pledges herself to Nyaxia, to the goddess, pledges to enter the tournament. She goes to bed, has a nightmare about her past. She wakes up somewhere else. The tournament has begun. This is where part 2 begins, full moon. And from here on out, every part, or almost every part, will begin with an interlude. The interludes are written in third person and they serve as background story. They essentially highlight events throughout Oriah's life when she was a child and a teenager. And in this first interlude, we basically get a flashback to the palace right after Vincent took her there. And he basically talks about that she didn't trust him at first and didn't even really want to eat. Basically, it's implied that 3-year-old Oriah didn't really eat any meals for 3 weeks. And I'm like, how is she still alive? It's like a super baby. And Vincent basically drills this idea into her that you're not safe in this world because you're a human, but I will protect you and teach you and keep you safe. So, chapter 5, we'll jump back into the main story. Oriah wakes up at the Moon Palace. The tournament has begun. The Moon Palace is essentially this special building which only really appears during the tournament, and where from how I understood, the contestants is where they can stay and hang out, and where sort of the trials begin. Again, this building is not really described all that well, but it's basically like a magic palace, if that helps. So she wakes up there and makes her way to a room where there are windows, because she's thinking to herself, admittedly in a smart way, if I find a window, sunlight can come in at some point, then the vampires can't attack me. So that's what she does. And she hears, on her way, she hears someone scream, and that scream sounds very familiar to her, and she thinks it's Ilana. So she runs off and makes it to the greenhouse, where she stays and spends the night. And we jump into chapter 6. We basically get a confirmation of that the Moon Palace is a magical building, because the layout of the building has changed. And Oriah tries to find out if that really was Ilana that she heard screaming, and yes, it was. Ilana has died, and Oriah is attacked by the vampire who killed Ilana, but she manages to fight him off, and he burns in the sunlight. And from now on, Oriah will frequently mention, the death of Ilana, how it was super devastating, that she will make those people pay who did that to her, that she wished Ilana could have been stronger, that she hadn't been a weak human. And you're like, I don't care, because we've met this character once. We had one conversation with her in chapter 1. That's it. Like, there's no connection you have as a reader to Ilana as a character, and Oriah will just constantly, well, not constantly, but will occasionally mention her, and you're like, yeah, I'm so sad this character died that I didn't know anything about, it's almost like we should have spent more time building up, your ordinary everyday life before you entered a death tournament, just like Hunger Games does it, but we don't have time for that. We need to jump into the death tournament straight away. So, in chapter 7, all the contestants are called together. So there's a bell that rings out, everyone gathers. We have around 50 people in total that attend this tournament. And basically the people who are watching over this are Vincent and his court, and basically the minister of the Church of Nyaxia. So they say tomorrow the Kajari, the tournament, will begin officially. I guess this first night of carnage didn't count. And we're made privy to some of the rules of previous tournaments. So like sometimes killing outside of the tournament is allowed, sometimes it isn't. So some of the rules are different every year. This is how this is described in the book. Sometimes Kajari contestants were forbidden from killing each other outside of trials. Other years, no such restriction existed. That was the thing about the Kajari. It had its rules and conventions, yes, but it was a little different every year, subject, like so many things, to Nyaxia's whims. You may defend yourself against aggressors, the minister said. However, the goddess appreciates the gift of blood within her trials. So essentially they're saying you're allowed to kill outside of the trials, like you can kill within the tournament grounds. If you so please. They hold another feast for some reason. At this feast, we meet a couple of people. We meet someone who's called Clin. He's the brother of the rando vampire that Oriah killed last night for murdering Ilana. And he's like angry and says he's out for revenge. And you're thinking, oh, this is going to be like a main rival, because he has a reason to hate her and he has a reason to kill her as soon as he can. Nope. Dude gets killed right away by another vampire. Yeah, so he gets mocked by a man called Rain Ajraj, and he's described as having wavy, dark hair with a red sheen, and Oriah looks at him and thinks he looks kind of familiar. The man I'd seen at the feast, I recognized him right away, because here, just as he had at the ball, he stood out as markedly different than any other vampire. Everything about him seemed rough and unfinished, right down to the way he held himself, with an untamed, threatening ease, stark in contrast to elegant vampire beauty. In case it wasn't obvious with Rain, our main male character and main love interest has entered the chat. So this guy basically ends up killing this random vampire who wanted to revenge his brother. So forget about that whole thing. And he kills that random vampire with something called Asterus power, which is essentially a very OP magic power, which is described comes from the stars and consists of black light. So essentially we just got ourselves another shadow wielder, let's be honest. So yeah, Rain saves Oriah and she's like, ooh, wonder who this is and wonder if he's gonna be dangerous. In chapter 8, shortly before the tournament starts, Oriah meets up with Vincent, and Vincent gives her dual-wielding swords which hold deadly poison. I was like, cool, that seems allowed and fair that he's just allowed to give her super weapons for the tournament. And this is not the only time this will happen. This will happen several times throughout this book, that Oriah will, like, during the tournament, just go and talk to Vincent and he will give her important information, will give her cool things. And you're like, how is this allowed? Like, I guess because he's the king, but is no one monitoring this shit? Like, at this point, Vincent might as well just help her win. Like, directly, because who's gonna stop them? He's the freaking king. How is this okay? Because this tournament is considered to be like this big spiritual, holy tradition for the goddess of vampires. What if she finds out that you've been cheating? I'm pretty sure she wouldn't like this. But again, no one's monitoring this shit, so I guess no one cares. After this talk, Oriah briefly runs into Rain, who basically is like, hey, in the kerfuffle last night where you killed that other dude, you accidentally stabbed me. It's cool. And she's like, so that's that. And at night, everyone is summoned again, and everyone has prepared for the tournament. Everyone has weapons, there's sigils, some groups have already formed, and you're like, cool, fair, I guess. And we're told that the first trial that will take place probably has something to do with the journey of the goddess Nyaxia. So all the trials are said to be like, represent certain parts of Nyaxia's journey as she became a queen. And as they're told, the tournament and the first trial are about to begin, the palace simply disappears. Chapter 9, the first trial begins. We're essentially in a coliseum with a glass ceiling, and quickly we realize that Oriah is being attacked by demonic creatures, so some kind of shadowy demons and several smaller monsters are attacking her. And Rain shows, because he's in the same place as Oriah, he ends up he shows his wings, and we find out that not only is he a vampire, he is also a Nightborn. He is a Rishon, so his wings have actual feathers, and they're described as like black but shimmering with like red and purple and other dark colors, so like a rainbow of darkness, I don't know, something like that. Like, they're really pretty and special and powerful. And my note here that I made while reading this chapter was, how much do we want to bet that he's secretly a royal? I don't know. Let's find out. The fact that I was able to predict this early on. Let's be honest here. What the hell? I shouldn't be able to do that. So Oriah basically ends up sort of fighting alongside Rain. She gets hit by an arrow, and the chapter ends here, because this book really likes to do, you know, these cheap cliffhanger endings. You know, when writers give you advice and they give you this general advice of, you know, end every chapter on a cliffhanger. This book does this a lot, but only to resolve this cliffhanger immediately in the next sentence of the next chapter. It's really, it's cheap, and it takes the excitement out of the whole thing if the story is just resolved, like the conflict is resolved immediately from the cliffhanger in the next paragraph. So we basically just fade to black, like she is hit by an arrow, she sort of feels weak, and then chapter 10 begins, and she just is sort of in a delirium. There's lots of blood around her, which is emphasized in a really weird, repetitive sort of way, where she's just like, blood and blood and blood rained on me. This kind of repetition the author likes to do a lot, by the way. It's kind of annoying. And Rain has to come in and save her, and the demons are defeated. And yeah, that's it. That's the first trial. They defeat the demons easily, and Rain saved her after she got hurt. And the Moon Palace comes back. That's it. This is a pattern that we will encounter many times throughout this book. Also, this kind of anticlimactic feeling surrounding the trials, that they're not very, very exciting. I'm gonna come back to it later, but this is just sort of as a preparation. If you thought this was underwhelming, it's not really gonna get that much better. The only other thing that's maybe of interest here is that Uriah observes someone who can wield fire. So we have other vampires that can wield other kind of magic. So following this first task in chapter 11, Rain follows her and talks to her a bit. My impression was, I don't like him. He has this pretentious cool guy attitude, like nothing bothers him, in that isn't very nice of you sort of vibe. It's this mix of condescending and flirty cool guy that makes me want to stab this man. So that was sort of my first impression of Rain, if that helps. And he offers Uriah a health potion for her wounds, but of course she's like, no, you're my rival, you might kill me, you're a vampire, I'm gonna stay away from this man. What I noticed here during this dialogue is that this book really likes swearing a lot, but also in a very weirdly 21st century contemporary sort of way. So we get stuff like, I'm boring as shit, or this is the good shit. And it's stuff like that where I'm like, why are you writing it like this? Why? In general, this book likes to swear a lot because, you know, we all know more swearing equals adult. Not how that works, but be prepared that if you read this book, you will encounter, hang on, I wrote it down, you will encounter the word fuck 245 times. That's basically almost like a fuck on every second page. Just as a general note, we get a bit more info on how the tournament works. There already first hints at, you know, should we ally with each other, because later down the line there's definitely going to be a trial where you need an ally. And basically the tournament always contains like basically a mixture of cooperation but also death and betrayal. And Rain introduces Uriah to another character, to a friend of his called Misha, who is the girl Uriah saw wielding the magic firepower earlier. And Misha is nice, actually. Like, amongst all the broody, dark vampires and all the, you know, black, dark, edgy stuff, she's nice. She's like sort of the sunshine stereotype. And she's basically besties. She becomes besties with Uriah, and she was sort of like a nice spot of sunlight in between all the darkness. Shame is that the narration doesn't really do anything with her, as we'll find out. She's basically just here to cheer on Uriah and Rain, and that's all of it. she and Rain want to sort of partner up with Oriah, also because, you know, they know that she has a connection with Vincent, and that would maybe bring some benefits, bring some bonus points. And if they team up now, she'll be easier to kill later. And Oriah's like, no, that's a no for me for now. But not for long, obviously. So in chapter 12, Oriah tries to meet up with Vincent again. He doesn't show up. However, Oriah gets randomly attacked, which is also something that happens a lot. She gets randomly attacked, wins, but is heavily injured, and she basically says, well, gotta go join Rain now anyway, because I'm hurt and I don't have anywhere else to go. And this chapter once again ends with a cliffhanger as she falls unconscious and the story fades to black. With this, we are starting part 3 of our story, Waning Moon. Once again, we get an interlude at the beginning of this part. Oriah in this flashback is now 11 years old, and they talk about, so her and Vincent talk about, you know, her life before she joined Vincent. She's very curious about it, and basically he sort of explains to her where he found her, and he says that he can't just turn her into a vampire because 2 and 3 turned ones or turnings end in death, and he won't risk it on her. And he at the end tells her that, you know, there's a special wish that you can make in this world. So in chapter 13, we rejoin Rain, Misha, and Oriah. They basically say that, hey, you came to our place, Rain saved your life again, so you're welcome. And now they are essentially left on their own, so like the competitors are left on their own within the Moon Palace, but Rain and his friend have found a nice little place to stay at. So that's why they sort of hang out now. Misha explains that she can wield fire because she has a connection to Atroxus, who is another god, and he gives her fire powers, I guess. So to come back to the magic system in this, so this is what I mean. Like, in Misha's case, I get it. Like, she wields Atroxus, the power of Atroxus, of that god. What about the other ones? Like, what Rain's power is, you know, this power that comes from the skies and it's like black light, and we never really find out what, like, Oriah's power is, where it comes from, you know. That's what I mean. There's not really an explanation as to why can they do these things. Like, where does the magic come from? What makes you a magic wielder? Can every vampire wield magic? If so, why can Oriah do it? Can potentially every human and vampire wield magic? Like, how does it work? Do you need to be granted magic by a god? Can you just sort of learn it if you want to? Like, what the rules are of the magic system are not clear in any way, shape, or form. What happens after that is that we have a brief encounter with another contestant named Angelica, who seems to be sort of upset about someone who attacked Oriah, but Oriah ended up defeating. So this is sort of like the first thing, that Angelica is sort of going to be like the rival, the main rival, but not really. We never really learn anything about her. She only has like 2 or 3 appearances. I'm not even sure if Angelica and Oriah ever have any kind of major conversation together, or any kind of major scene together. I don't think so. So why is she even here? Oh, and of course, just before the chapter ends, we get a little hint at the romance to come, because Rain is standing close to Oriah, and that's sort of what makes her a little, whoo, like just for a moment. His rose-colored gaze slid to me, and I became aware all at once of how close he was standing, close enough that I could smell him. A scent that reminded me of Severon heat beating down over the desert. Something else, something I couldn't quite place. And with this, we jump into chapter 14. We have another talk with Vincent. In this one, he's not a big fan of who Oriah is hanging out with. He doesn't like Rain very much. And he like goes on and on about that, you know, he loves her, like she's really important to him, but at the same time, you know, I'm a ruthless king and I will not take any challenges from you, because Oriah is like, hey, can't you like help me, or what's your problem with these people? And basically he's like, don't you dare. We basically find out that he has never said at any point since he has had her, since he's adopted her, that he loves her. And for someone who always goes on and on about, oh, you mean so much to me, yeah, like, you're so important to me, it seems kind of like this father-daughter relationship seems kind of toxic if you think about it. I didn't like it very much. After this conversation, Oriah makes her way back. She's worried that maybe someone saw her, and we're told that there are only 2 weeks left of training until the next trial. And if you're thinking we're gonna use this time, those 2 weeks, to, you know, establish character motivations, to, you know, get to know Rain and Misha a bit better, to like build the friendships between them. No, we just basically skip 2 weeks of training, and it said that the next trial is less than a day away. So, yeah, great. Nothing. Like, this could have been great relationship development, and we could have gotten to know the characters a bit better, like especially Misha, who's more of a secondary character, but nope. Why? Why would we do that? Why would we spend any time with these characters who are actually really important to the story? No. So Oriah and Rain, they like fight together. There's a lot of, you know, bickering. Then he gets a little too pushy. Like, he doesn't respect her physical boundary and like basically just gets up real close and tries to push her into, you know, doing something, and she basically is like, fuck off, and throws him out the window during training. And I love how just before that happens, she still kind of thinks that he's sexy, even though it's not in a too intrusive way. Even during training, I never let him get this close. He was only 3 strides away, 2 of his. That was how much larger than me he was. He wore a linen shirt that clung to his body, sweaty with the exertion of the last 6 hours of exercise, highlighting each swell and dip of his muscular form. His hair was bound, but over the hours strands of it had escaped and now plastered themselves to his face and neck. I couldn't decide if he looked more or less intimidating this way. More because he looked a bit unhinged, and less because I appreciate all of these unpolished things more than I appreciate any other aspect of him. Then he decides to get a bit pushy, and she basically knocks him out of the way with a sudden explosion of her magic powers. In chapter 16, nothing really happens except that Oriah, going out for a walk, she sees a guy near a fountain who is like smoking or something, and he seems a bit out of place, and he seems to be talking to some people about bets and stuff, and he basically just is like, good luck, Oriah, and like goes away. That's it. We jump to chapter 17. Oriah talks to Misha about Rain. We learn that they're not a couple, of course not. We learn that they're really close friends, and that Rain is a bit of a wild card. He's different, he's dangerous, but a cool guy. Rain eventually comes back. He's been out getting drunk, and what I do appreciate here, that he is being a prick, but Misha actually calls him out on it. Like, she's like, oh my god, you're drunk, you're being an arsehole right now, can you please leave? So in chapter 18, the second trial begins, and we soon find out that there is a maze they have to cross. Here, Orion meets someone who she's seen before. It's a man or a boy named Ibrahim. And Ibrahim we have met briefly before, when Vincent was like pointing out to her at the party, like, who's probably about to enter the tournament, and that's where we met Ibrahim for the first time. And Ibrahim is gonna pop up a couple of times throughout the book, but he's never really going to be an interesting character, even though he has the potential to be a very interesting character, because Orion knows him. They have some sort of connection, but it's never really made clear what Ibrahim's actual deal is, what their connection is. We never spend time with him. We never have like a longer conversation with him. We just know there's some sort of connection between him and Orion, and that's sort of it. And that's it. That's all we're getting. Like, they end up fighting, but just as she is about to kill him, something happens. Like, the walls of the maze start moving, and they are separated, and Orion runs away and basically comes across a part of the maze where a bunch of humans are being held basically for consumption for the vampires. And Orion is, of course, really shocked by this. It's like, how is Vincent allowing this? Did he know about this? This is horrible. And she ends up trying to save a little human girl. Why? I don't know. I mean, she prides herself on being such a heartless badass, but then she goes out of her way to save this little girl, which almost gets her killed. She gets randomly attacked again, and then Rain comes in and saves her again. Like, how many times is this gonna happen? Many times. Rain will save the main female character's life many, many times, even though she's a supposed badass. Then we get another surprise attack. This time is Angelica. However, I think Orion manages to like poison her a bit with her blades, fights her off, and she manages to like take the little human girl she saved to the finishing line, essentially, of the trial. And she, like, with her last breath, because of course she got hurt again and is about to fall unconscious, she gives the girl to Rain and says, "Don't let them take her." And he says, like, I won't, don't worry. And we have a fade to black again as Orion falls unconscious, and another underwhelming trial has found its end. If you're wondering about this human girl, you know, will she play an important role? Will she come back later? Will Orion mention her again? Will this act of heroism impact Orion any way, shape or form? No. The rescue of this human girl will never be mentioned again. Why was this here? No idea. We're just moving on from that, I guess. So in chapter 20, Misha says that 29 contestants are left, and among them is Ibrahim. So Ibrahim and also Angelica, they have survived. And in order to blow off some steam, Orion decides to like go out and go kill some vampires. Even though she's a human, she's injured, was poisoned, she goes and does it, and Rain actually joins her. Here's where I have to mention, why are they allowed to just like go and leave? Like, they're in the middle of the tournament, and between trials they're just allowed to go about and travel, go wherever they like, do whatever they please, and they're just allowed to do that. Why? Also, if that's the case, why isn't everyone cheating? Like, if I was allowed to leave the tournament area and just go do shit, I would just get the most badass weapons, the deadliest shit that helps me win super easily. That's what I would do. No one ever does that, really. But yeah, for some reason, they aren't allowed to do that. And I don't understand why. How is this fair? How is this allowed? What benefit does it bring to the overall tournament experience? I don't get it. So in chapter 21, we find out, yes, Rain did save the girl. He gave her to a human family. And he mentions that he himself was once human, so he is a turned vampire, which made me wonder, wouldn't most vampires in this world be statistically speaking turned? Because how else would you make more vampires? I know Nyaxia originally created the vampires, but is she still doing it? Is she just like snapping a finger and more vampires appear? Because I don't think that's what's happening. So wouldn't most vampires, statistically speaking, be turned at some point? I don't know. But the good thing that actually happens in this chapter is that Rain actually apologizes for his shitty behavior before the second trial, where he was being pushy. He says, "And I'm sorry for my behavior before the trial," he went on. I was thinking of things that had nothing to do with you. I was having a bad day." This stunned me even more than the compliment, even if I could practically hear Misha feeding him the words. So compliments to the book here that Rain actually recognizes his shitty behavior from earlier and actually apologizes for it. You know how rare this is with male love interests in this genre? Like, thank you for giving me this. That's actually good content. And as he says this, Oriah suddenly realizes how handsome he is, and they decide to work together because Rain is a handsome boy, I guess. He pushed the wayward strands of his hair away from his face, the smile still clinging to his lips and moonlight outlining the angles of his profile. The sudden overwhelming realization hit me that he was actually very handsome. I was always surrounded by beautiful people, and learned long ago the hard way how important it was to numb myself to that. But in this moment, just for a split second, Rain's beauty struck me like a blow, so unexpected and staggering my breath caught in my throat. He wasn't the refined elegance of vampires, perfect cheekbones and perfect lips and perfect glittering eyes. No, it was rougher, more lived in, more alive. So yeah, Rain is a really, really special boy. So this is why they decide to work together as we go into chapter 22. Here we have another conversation with Vincent, and he says he was not responsible for the humans being in the arena, even though it's kinda, I don't really think it's the truth. Like, it's not really made clear here that he genuinely speaks in an honest tone of voice. And he's like, "Oh, no, I'm not responsible for the humans. I'm so sorry about the humans dying and that they were taken here." And you're like, we all know we're going somewhere with this later, aren't we? And he basically says, keep going, do the tournament. You need power to accomplish things, and I want you to be able to win this so we can basically come join me in my vampire royalty. What I noticed here is, because there are many dialogues in this book, what I noticed is that often, like when there are longer conversations, this book will do, like, there's a line of dialogue, then there are 2 or even 3 entire paragraphs of narration in between there, and then there's another dialogue line which refers or answers or replies to the other line of dialogue 3 paragraphs ago. And that keeps happening, and it's kind of irritating because, I don't know, maybe I don't have a good memory, but I find it very weird that you have 2 or 3 paragraphs of narration between 2 relating lines of dialogue, because I don't remember what this person is replying to. You gave me like 20 sentences of narration in between that. I don't know. So that's a bit irritating to read sometimes when there are longer dialogue scenes in this book. So as Oriah keeps talking to Vincent, she mentions that she's been honing her magic, that she's accidentally been wielding it, and she says that, you know, she's been able to do magic but never like this before. I'm still wondering how the fuck has she been able to wield tiny bits of magic before having any kind of connection to a god or anything else. Like, she offered her blood to Nyaxia when she entered the tournament, so I would get it if she then started to develop magical powers, because then she has a connection to a god, and that's how she gets her powers. But that's not really the case, because we're told that she has tried to wield her magic powers before the tournament when she was younger. But it never gets explained. We begin part 4, Half Moon. Once again, we have an interlude at the beginning of this. We learn that Oriah, in this flashback, is 16 years old, and that she meets a man who is, quote, only a few years older than her, which I personally find quite concerning considering that she's underage. And we're told that they were in a relationship which would turn out to be dangerous. Jumping back to the main story, chapter 23, Oriah and Rain, they hunt together, they sort of develop a bit of chemistry. Once again, we sort of montage this whole relationship development bit, just like in previous chapters. Meanwhile, Oriah tries to train her magic together with Misha. She keeps, so Oriah also keeps having conversation with Vincent, who still doesn't really want to tell her what's going on, and because we get the feeling that, oh, there's some kind of political business going on in the back, and Oriah really wants to know what that is about. And I'm like, even if, what do you want to do? You're stuck in this tournament, you can't do anything. They're still like going about the business. They come and go as they please, because for some reason they are allowed to do that. And Misha does what she does best, and basically is the hype person for Rain and Oriah. I faltered mid-movement. What's wrong? I asked, alarmed. Did I hurt you? No, she shook her head, a grin spreading across her mouth. It's just, gods, look at you two. It's amazing. There's no bonding like bonding over murder, Rain says dryly. I'm just so proud, she sighed, and I was still trying to figure out whether she was joking or not, as he rolled his eyes. So yeah, this is what Misha does in this book. She is the hype person for the main couple. We don't really get anything else in regards to, you know, who she is, what her past is, how she becomes really good friends with Oriah, or how anything, like how anything that's relating to her that's somehow interesting or important. Nothing. We entered chapter 24. We learn that Oriah and Rain have been going to the outside districts to hunt vampires, and we're told that they basically wiped out most of the vampires in the southern district. I'm like, how did you wipe out all vampires in an entire district? There's only 2 of you, and it's only been 2 weeks. How? Also, one of you is human. How the fuck did this happen? That's impossible. So then Rain says that he wants to go for human beer, that he wants to get drunk, And he's like, when they get to the bar, Rain is like super chill, comfy, just like he's a normal human. And he's like really good at controlling his vampire urges. Why he is so good at self-control, why Rain is never like full-on bloodthirsty in the presence of Uriah or other humans, never explained. It's kind of waved away with, he was once human, so he can relate to them. I'm like, yeah, but he can't be the only one who's turned in this entire world, in this entire tournament. So why is he so special? It's never really explained to us. So then they have a conversation a bit about the tournament, why they're there, and we learn that Rain essentially joined the tournament because of Misha. Like, Misha wanted to really enter the tournament and basically forced Rain to join him, and I'm like, that's stupid. There's only one winner, the rest will be dead. Why would you join this tournament with a friend? One of you will die. That is pretty shitty if you force a friend to enter this competition with you. And no, this is never questioned by anyone. Why Rain and Misha would do this. And I'm like, how did no one think about this? Why did anyone think this is a good plan? And then, of course, we get another cliffhanger ending, random out of nowhere, as there's a giant explosion outside the pub. Chapter 25, the Tower of the Moon Palace is gone. The exact spot where Misha was staying in their flat. So they want to raise up there. This is the first time they're flying together. So Rain shows his wings and scoops her up in his arms. It's a very intimate moment for several paragraphs, even though the situation is very dire and serious. And even Uriah herself is like, I don't have time to think about how hot he is right now. We're trying to save our friend. And it's revealed to us that this is probably an attack via Nightborn magic. So other Nightborn vampires have probably done this. There are some weird demonic creatures over Misha's body as they get there. And they manage to fight this monster off, and they take and Uriah basically is like, you take Misha, you can only care one of us, and you come and get me later. And Rain's like, I hate doing it, but I'll do it. There are like cliffhangers within one chapter, you know, where a paragraph will be like, and then the monsters came, and I didn't have my weapon. Then there's a cut, and like right below that is, oh, and I fought them off, and you're like, why are you giving me cliffhangers in the chapter? It's ridiculous. Like, these things are resolved immediately, right away, all the time, and I don't understand why this author keeps doing that. So, of course, very conveniently, now Uriah is able to like suddenly feel a strength inside of her from the night force, and she is able to suddenly activate her magic powers. How? No idea. Basically all the magic moments she has are tied to her having real strong emotional reactions that happen at very, very convenient moments throughout the entire plot, you know, just in time for her to save a friend, just in time to like save herself. They keep happening in a very convenient way, and it's very cliched and stupid. She manages to annihilate essentially 4 demonic creatures. She says it's like the beginning, we suddenly have the beginning of a bloodbath as demons are attacking vampires, other vampires are fighting other vampires and humans, and like, what? Why? What's happening right now? Like, we didn't build this political tension. We don't know what's happening because we've been stuck inside this arena with Uriah. We don't know anything about what's going on outside. And it's just like, and there's a political bloodbath, and you're like, sure. We are told that during this attack, 4 other contestants died, but Misha is safe for now. Essentially, Misha got fridged. I mean, not entirely, because she isn't dead, but essentially the narration was like, we don't have time for another female main character the main love interest hangs out with, and it's now time to focus on the romance, and the other girl character would not fit into that, so she has to leave. That's essentially what this feels like when you read it. Vincent reacting to this terrorist attack essentially basically declares war on the Rishan vampires, and he wants to have a talk with Rain, who is one of those vampires. And they're trying to get Misha out of the contest, saying that she's too injured, she will not be able to continue, but her withdrawal has been rejected. Chapter 27, we meet up with Vincent again. And he says, of course it was the Rishan, they've been doing this, but Rain says it wasn't them. And so basically it's revealed that Vincent once used his wish. So when he won the tournament, Vincent once used his wish basically to gain power so he could take away the power of the Rishan vampires. So he essentially took the power away from them so he could become king. So that's sort of the beef these two warring factions of the vampires have with each other. And I'm like, why is this wish so limiting? Why does no one ever think of a more useful wish? Because Vincent literally wished for take their power away and give it to me, or something like that. I'm like, why just not wish for, I wish I was the king of the vampires and everyone loved me? Something like that. Like, I wish I was the most beloved ruler of the kingdom. Like, why are all these wishes seem so useless and limited? Why you're like, why don't you come up with better wishes? It's not that hard. Not really. And Vincent tries to convince Oriah to basically help him in this war, that she should help him. And he says that, warning, political statement here from Vincent, that he wants to liberate the Rishan territories. And you're like, Vincent, my man, this is where I stop thinking that you might be good. This is very problematic, my guy. Or I was like, maybe not the best idea. Also, maybe you could help me, because, she's like, there's my friend, Misha, and she wants to withdraw, but her withdrawal has been rejected, and Vincent's like, just kill her. She's dead weight, just kill her. And Oriah's like, thanks, that's not what I wanted to hear. Vincent warns her of Rain, like he doesn't like him at all. And Oriah's like, he doesn't know things, I'm gonna do my own thing. And Oriah decides to go and save Misha by herself, and she goes to visit the minister of the church, and she basically offers him some of her human blood so he will accept Misha's withdrawal. It feels on purpose disgusting and creepy, so congratulations for making me feel ugh. Then we jump to chapter 28. Rain is brought back from an interrogation. It's made very clear that he's been tortured by Vincent and his people, even though Vincent said, I'm not going to kill him, I'm going to break him or something like that. Well, I'm not going to break him. But yeah, he's been injured. And of course, we're using this to establish some physical intimacy, because this book really likes the nurse trope. Like, Rain will get hurt or injured in some way, shape, or form, and then Oriah takes care of him, and it's, the end. it's a reason to establish physical intimacy between them. So now this book really starts leaning into building the relationship between them in a much more intimate, romantic, and also sexy way. Learn that Misha, her withdrawal has been accepted, but that for some reason, because of her wounds, her magic now won't work anymore. Why? Maybe because she lost her connection to her god? I don't know. Again, the magic system doesn't really do anything for me in this book. So then Rain and Oriah are summoned again for the next task. I think, I didn't quite understand it, they drink something from a goblet and they fall yet again unconscious. Chapter 29 starts with Oriah having a vision of her past lover, you know, the one that was mentioned before, but there's also some visions of Rain mixed in there, and she kisses the weird person mix thing. It's weird. They wake up. We realize, okay, this is now the part of the trial where, you know, you had to team up with someone because the potion basically created a mental connection, a mental link between Rain and Oriah. I don't know. I don't understand how this was managed. Like, how were the organizers of the tournament able to like tell, okay, these two, you know, what connect, these two are allies, and somehow we're gonna mix potions so that these two specific people have a mental connection. It's not made clear whatsoever how this works, logistically speaking, magically speaking. I have no idea. It's not explained. But yeah, we enter the trial with this mental connection between our two characters. They are in separate cells on opposite ends of the arena. That's how I understood it. Again, very limited descriptions as to what's going on, especially like during these trials and action scenes. Things happen one after another, and I'm like, what? There's a doorway in the middle of the arena. There's monsters in between like their path to there. They basically have to approach, again, that's how I understood, approach the finish line from opposite sides of the arena while they have their mental connection and while they're sort of like able to feel what the other person feels, etc., that kind of thing. Oriah observes some of the other contestants. For some reason, she knows who teamed up with who, and I'm like, how the fuck do you know that? Because you haven't talked or spent time with any of the other contestants. We don't know anything about them, so how the hell do you know who they teamed up with? No idea. We are never made aware of this information in any way, shape, or form, but for some reason, Oriah knows. She just knows. Suddenly a flash of light coming from the gate. I think someone gets sizzled to a crisp or something, and she gets thrown down basically into the pits with the monsters from like the shockwave. Of course, cliffhanger ending to that chapter again. We pick up immediately in chapter 30. Rain tells her to just use her magic, and with the power of anger and other strong emotions, Oriah just does it. She just does it. Again, feels very convenient and a bit cheap that, you know, Oriah just happens to activate her overpowered AoE attack just at the right time when she's about to get killed. She manages to, I guess, somehow fight her way through the creatures. Suddenly, she's near the center. She's just legging it again. It's not really made clear how. Like, the narration is really, like, jumps through these events, like, really, really quickly, and I had trouble following the action, especially during this trial. I just didn't know how she got where in what time, and suddenly she was just there at the finish line. And Rain, of course, gets there as well. They embrace and they go back to the palace together, and I was like, what the fuck just happened? I have understood nothing of what has just transpired in this trial. We begin part 5, Crescent Moon. Again, we have a little interlude in the beginning. She describes her first time, the first time she has sex with her first lover, who was also a vampire. And it doesn't turn out well. It basically turns into warning sort of rape. Like, she withdraws consent because he gets too bloodthirsty and ends up biting her. And she's not into it at all. She almost dies and says several times, no, stop, and he doesn't do it. And she manages to fight him off, and she runs off to Vincent, and he reacts to this whole situation somehow. It's not really said yet how. Chapter 31. At this point, 11 contestants remain. There is still Ibrahim, who we don't really know anything about, and Angelica plus her partner, who I think is called Ivan. I'm not sure. These people are not important. We don't know anything about them. There is going to be another feast. Why are there so many feasts in this book? Also, why, in this Tournament of Death, do we have time for feasts? Why? Why is there time for this? How? Oriah sort of thinks about what's been going on during the trial, and she realizes that she does actually trust Rain now, but that also he could just kill her now because he doesn't need her anymore. So she trusts him and likes him, but it's also like, but he could kill him. Complicated relationships. In chapter 32, they attend the party. Vincent approaches Oriah at the party. She's angry with him because he and his people tortured Rain, and he's being, surprisingly soft. And you're like, why is he being so nice? This is like some serious shit she's talking about right now. And he actually, he just kind of refuses to explain anything, as he always does, because why would we want to know anything about, the political intrigues and schemings that Vincent is up to? Here at the party, someone we've met before once reappears, namely the guy Oriah saw smoking at a fountain many chapters ago. He's there. He makes an appearance, talks to Rain. He drops a name. There's a name drop called, Nessanin or Nessanin? I don't know. Something like that. And he says that, maybe is Oriah like Nessanin? Is that the same thing that with her, sort of like named of a past love of Rain? And Rain's like, he talks to Orion, it's like, don't think about that right now. How about we go somewhere else? How about we go somewhere quiet, somewhere else? Chapter 33, they continue to do sort of like their own thing. They're both a bit tipsy by now. They're just like looking at each other, complimenting each other, basically eye fucking at this point. They talk about their feelings, the trials, and Rain really tries to encourage her humanity, that she's not like the vampires, that she's human, she should embrace being human, and that there's nothing wrong with that. She still thinks that he might as well kill her now, but he basically, while they have this conversation, he basically gives her an opening to just kill him. He basically sort of indicates how defenseless he is right now, and that he wouldn't complain that if she were to attack him right now. But of course she doesn't do it. They get real close. It's intimate. They basically want to fuck at this point. But she turns away and is like, no, we shouldn't. Chapter 34, they talk a bit more about each other. She admits that she doesn't want to kill him. He says he's a good cook. I guess that's his special talent. He does some cooking for her at the palace later. And she thinks his food is absolutely amazing. So good. He makes a really weird comment. and says, after she's tasted his cooking, when I finally came back to my senses, I blinked and looked at Rain, who was watching me with strange bemused expression. That wasn't how I had imagined making you come for the first time, he remarked. I stopped chewing. Yeah, that comment was totally normal and appropriate and not weird at all. They decide they want to go visit Misha, and they basically go and do that in the next chapter. It reveals literally nothing. It doesn't do anything for the plot or character development. At this point, the story is really starting to drag. Like, there's a lot of padding now, and it's not, this padding isn't even used to like develop the characters. It's just boring ass conversations for pages and pages on end. Chapter 36, they are back at the palace, but they notice that the palace stops providing for them, so they're locked in, and there's essentially no food and no blood to drink. So this is sort of where the next trial is beginning, and she says that she should isolate herself from him because, you know, she's human and he could go full bloodlust. He's very offended by that idea, even though she's absolutely right. And Rain just leaves. Then in chapter 37, we're in a forest. Yeah. So the setting changes yet again for the next trial. We're in a forest now. Orion immediately worries that, oh no, there are like so many, there's been no food, there's been no blood, all the vampires are going to be like savage and they're going to hunt for me. But no, don't worry about that. Luckily there are deer in this forest, and all the vampires are immediately jumping on the deer and eating those. So in case you were worried about Orion getting hunted by actual vampires, no, because for some reason no one makes use of this rule that you can kill people at any time. It's been said in the beginning of this tournament that you can kill people during the trials, but also outside of them. And except for the very first night, this never happens again. No one tries to find Orion, who would be the easiest target considering she's human. No one tries to find her outside of the trials and go kill her. Like, she's right there. She's a weak human. You have superpowers, essentially. Go and kill her. Why is this never happens? This never happens. So all excitement taken out of that, the vampires just start eating the deer, but it's revealed that, oh no, the deer are poisoned. Like, something weird's happening to the vampires who eat the deer. And Orion's immediately like, oh no, I have to let Rain know about this in case he's so hungry he starts eating some deer. She finds Rain 1 sentence later. She's like, oh no, I have to find him. It could be really dangerous. I looked around and there he was. I'm like, thank you for the non-existent tension. It was very interesting. And she says like, oh, he could be so dangerous right now because he hasn't had blood in so long. And her reaction is run straight at him. Run straight at the bloodthirsty vampire who could like seriously kill her right now because he hasn't had anything to eat in quite a while. Somehow she manages to body slam him to the ground and essentially just screams some sense into him. Like, I swear to God, every conflict in this book that's like mildly dangerous, mildly exciting, proves to be mildly problematic, every ploppy that resembles conflict is solved immediately. There is no tension to this. Like, imagine if, like, in this particular moment, imagine if she can't save him right now. Like, she can't save him right now and she can't rely on him for this trial. Like, she actively would have to avoid him until he gets better after the trial is over. Like, imagine if that was the actual story, which would actually be exciting and, you know, be about her being a cool, independent badass like she keeps saying she is, which doesn't actually happen. So she body slams him, screams some sense into him, and drags him into a cave where they find some shelter. He needs blood, obviously, and she essentially offers. And he's like, oh no, we shouldn't, and this is dangerous, but of course him being hurt and needing blood is an excuse to establish physical intimacy. So in order to so he can drink from her, she of course has to straddle him with her legs on top of him and embrace him so he can bite her neck, and it's super sexy. They're basically humping each other, basically dry fucking. If you want, this can be the first sex scene, just without penetration. So yeah, it's super intimate, and he gets a boner. She wants more of it. Like, they rub against each other. You know, it's all that. And what we get here during the intimacy scenes is that, well, first off, they don't go on forever, which I sort of appreciate, and that this author really doesn't want to use the word penis. There's every kind of synonym you can think of for penis is in this book, just not the word penis. So in this first intimacy scene, we get the word cock, hard length, unmistakable hardness, and the worst, arguably the worst one, and I feel disgusting saying it out loud, full thick length. Someone give me soap so I can wash out my mouth. I hate it. I honestly hate it. But yeah, just to give you an idea. And Oriah orgasms from this, and it's described in the most cliched way. And she says that basically stars explode in her vision. Like, stars exploded over my vision. His name fell from my lips in a gasp. Every muscle coiled and then released. Nothing existed but him. So, yeah, very cliched, very stereotypical descriptions here. I'll probably come back to those intimacy scenes later, but this is like sort of the first time they have something that resembles sex. Chapter 39, they continue with the trial. They basically need to reach another endpoint, because every trial in this tournament is fight off some monsters and get to the finish line while making your way through dangerous terrain. That's literally every trial in this. And while they make their way there to the endpoint, they have to fight their way through basically acid fog. And if you're thinking, wasn't there like a forest arena, dangerous monster, and acid fog in Hunger Games? Yes, you would be correct, because there are many, many, many inspirations taken from Hunger Games in this book, in case you couldn't tell. Like, the death tournament aside, there's stuff like this, like the acid fog, the changing arena. In this case now it's the forest arena with the dangerous monsters. Later we get monsters that resemble former combatants. We get only one person can survive, but there's also special team-up rules. There's so many elements in this that resemble Hunger Games. It honestly got really irritating at some point. Of course, I never want to say, oh, this author like clearly took that from another book and plagiarized their idea or something, but it just becomes very, very obvious where the major inspiration for this death tournament seems to have come from. Chapter 40, we get a brief attack by some monsters, like brief wolf attack. They realize that they're not really in a forest, but essentially the ruins of an old city. And they look up on this area, and Rain says that this area once housed 500,000 people, vampires and humans, and Vincent basically genocided this whole area. 500,000 people. In case you didn't think that Vincent was bad enough already, he did an oopsie. He did a genocide. Congratulations. Chapter 41. Rain saves Oriah again as she's being attacked by Ivan, who is the partner of Angelica. They fight him off, and they make it to the end of the trial alongside Ibrahim and Angelica. And it's revealed to them right away that instead of the last trial being like a couple of weeks away, they're being told that the next trial will be held tomorrow. And then they leave the arena and see that the civil war between the vampires is ongoing. Part 6, New Moon. The interlude for this one is that Vincent essentially made Oriah kill her first love. So the one who basically ended up assaulting her. Vincent is like, you have to kill him. And she does it. She's 16 years old. This can't be healthy. Chapter 42. Rain keeps telling Oriah that, Vincent is responsible for this, for the destruction of this entire district. And Oriah's like, no, I can't believe it. How is this possible? And she decides to go and confront Vincent about this, which happens in chapter 43. And she's basically like, you lied to me. I thought you were not like them. Like, this is so cruel of you. And Vincent's reaction is to get violent with her. Again, this father-daughter relationship is not toxic at all. And she just decides to be like, well, fuck this. I'm out. I'm not talking to you again. And she leaves, is upset. Rain finds her and comforts her. And this is where they end up having their first true kiss. This kiss proceeds into chapter 44. They proceed with the snogging session, lots of making out. They decide to go back to their place. And this is where we get our proper sex scene. Once again, we get some good synonyms for penis, because this author really doesn't want to use this word. We have just the word length. We have rigid length, we have stiff length. Every iteration of the word length you could think of is probably in this book also. Her parts, her vagina and clitoris, are at several points referred to as folds and slit. And can we please make those words illegal to refer to the vagina area? Because they sound low-key kind of I really don't like them. They sound kind of icky. And they completely take me out of the scene. What I do like about the sex scene in this, that first off, I mentioned this earlier, it doesn't go on forever. Like, one of my major complaints in Fourth Wing was that the sex scene takes up one entire chapter. It goes on for 15, 20 pages. And it's just too long. It's just too long, people, honestly. No, I don't need to read about sex for 20, 25 pages. Honestly, no. So this sex scene lasts maybe, 5 pages, if even. And I like that he fully gives her control. Like, Rain says that she's in control. She does what she wants and he will follow her lead, essentially. I like that. I like that he's aware of, he's a dangerous being and that maybe she doesn't feel entirely, fully 100% safe and comfortable, but that that's why he says, you're in charge, you're in control. I'll do what you want me to do and nothing else. So I like that. I like that. That's actually some good sexy content. We're treated to some sexy descriptions naturally. What I've noticed here is, there's also something that happened earlier, that there's something about how Oriah keeps describing Rain, how he smells, because he smells like the sky. He smells like the sky, And she says, he smelled like the sky, he tasted like falling. And you're like, what? What does that mean? The sky is nothing? The sky is air, which smells and tastes like nothing? Falling is a concept, a verb, which also can't taste like anything? What does it mean? He smells and tastes like the sky, like air. What do you mean? It doesn't mean... That's like some of that shit where I'm again like, please read your stuff out loud, because then you realize some of the lines you've written, especially during intimacy scenes, sound stupid as hell. This is the best example. Again, how did an editor not pick this up and was like, what do you mean, the sky? The sky is nothing. Unless someone farted, or I don't know, there's pollution, the sky is not really gonna smell like anything. So yeah, the sex proceeds, and I have a problem with the sex scene, which is more of a general problem I have with the sex scenes in these types of books, that, you know, everything is described as perfect again. Like, he's so good, he's so perfect, he's like the most hottest person. Naturally, his penis is immensely big, because of course it is. And for somehow that's never a problem to the female characters, that the male main characters have gigantic penises. Somehow that's never a problem, because it's the most beautiful thing this girl has ever seen. Like, honestly, the penis in this book gets described as like basically a piece of art, like a masterpiece, and you're like, calm down, girl, it's just a penis. But no, everything has to be like perfection, and he makes her feel things she's never felt before. And the way in which these types of sex scenes are written, not just in this book, but also other books, like Fourth Wing, for example, these sex scenes all feel the same. They all read the same. I've read dozens of sex scenes like this in books like this and in fan fiction. It is all exactly the same. There's never any kind of creativity to it. There's never any kind of normalcy to this whole thing. The expectations are always set really high. Everything has to be like super fucking hot. Everything has to be perfection and the best thing in the world and the greatest feeling that ever physically existed for this particular character. I don't think I've ever read a sex scene in these types of stories where for once the sex isn't the greatest thing in the world. Like, maybe something funny happens. Maybe something weird happens. Maybe, realistically speaking, not everyone climaxes. Stuff like this never happens. And I get to a certain degree these types of scenes are wish fulfillment, but also, isn't it boring to you if you read this exact type of spice every time? Isn't this really boring to you? There is never anything like, oh, maybe the first time having sex with a person isn't that great. Maybe there's some pain. Maybe there's a bit of uncomfortableness. Maybe there's a bit of awkwardness. Maybe maybe they do have great sex, but not everyone climaxes. I don't know. Just stuff like that. Just give me some variety. Describe not just the physical acts, but also like go into the feelings. How is it making them not just physically feel, but emotionally? Like, give me something. Like, cause this is I've seen this and it's boring, but at least it's short. In chapter 45, after the sex, they talk a bit, and Rain basically now decides, 10 chapters before the ending, decides to reveal his background story. He says that he was once stranded on a small, dangerous island where a vampire eventually found him, and he offered him to turn him into a vampire so he can survive. At the time this happened, Rain was 32. And that took me out a bit, because yes, Oriah is of age. She's like 23 years old, but I was thinking, okay, Rain is like, I don't know, he looks like 25 or something. No, he's like 10 years older than her. Well, obviously he's even older because he's a vampire, has been around for centuries, but you know what I mean. So at the time he was turned, he was 32 years old, and he had a wife with a child on the way. That's a big deal. Are we gonna talk about that? No? Okay. Then later, so years later, after he was already a vampire, we are told that there's the name again, Nasinin, who was the wife of the vampire who turned Rain. And he loved her. And he wanted to run away with her, but she said no and didn't go with him. So Rain traveled the world and he met Misha, made friends with her. And I'm like, isn't it great how we're basically told his entire background story within 5 pages, like just before the ending, like 50 pages before the ending? Isn't this great? We couldn't have hinted at any of this earlier. It couldn't have been delivered to us piece by piece throughout the entire book. No, it's nice. It's also not anticlimactic or to just be told the entire thing just like that. Just dump it on me. Yep, cool. Thank you. The final trial begins. It's Oriah, Rain, Angelica, and Ibrahim. For this final trial, guess what? They've divided the arena. There's some dangerous terrain and some monsters, and they have to kill each other and get to a certain point so they can win. Because all of these trials are the same. So they basically fight demonic monsters and reanimated corpses of former rivals. Just in case we weren't done with the Hunger Games parallels, we do get monsters that have the faces of former combatants. Yay, plagiarism. So Oriah obviously defeats them relatively easily, to be honest. Then she ends up fighting Ibrahim, and obviously she wins. It's supposed to be this really tragic moment because they've had a connection, and he was sort of a tragic character because his parents didn't like him and he was abused by them. But no, we've never spent any time with this guy. We've never really gotten to know him. We've never talked to him. And now Oriah faces him and he's like, oh, I'm so glad you're the one who I'm glad it's you who kills me. And that's what she does. She ends up killing him. And wow, what a wasted character. We knew nothing about Ibrahim. Like, we've never had a scene where they interact for a longer time. We've never spent any time with him. There's no weight to his death whatsoever. But of course, it's so dramatic that we have to end the chapter on his death. So in chapter 47, 3 contestants remain. They face each other. And Angelica fights Oriah. And she is about to kill her. Like, Angelica is about to kill Oriah. And then she sees something, gets distracted, and this is the opening for Oriah to switcheroo and kill Angelica instead. What did Angelica see? No idea. But this is never explained. It's never explained why, like, what Angelica sees off screen that makes her stop killing Oriah. This felt so fucking cheap. It's like the author didn't know that she wrote herself in the corner, was like, oh, it has to be exciting, but also like, oh no, Oriah can't die because she's the main protagonist. Angelica gets distracted, Oriah kills her. That's it. Why, yeah, sure, why come up with any kind of satisfying rivalry between these two women? Why they hate each other? You know, We don't need that. We don't need that at all. So now it's Rain versus Uriah. As we go into chapter 48, they fight, and he basically is like baiting her and essentially sort of lets her win and is trying to be like, oh yeah, come on, just do it. Like, and he's basically like, she should just do it. She should kill him. And he basically lets her win and helps her push her blade into him. Like she doesn't really do it, he does it for her, essentially. And Uriah has won the death tournament. Big surprise. And who wants to bet that Rain isn't gonna stay dead for very long? Chapter 49. Upon Rain's death, Uriah says that she hasn't cried in years, not even for Ilana. But she now will cry for this guy she's met 3 months ago and has dated for about 1 week. She will cry about this guy, but not about the death of her parents or the death of the old lady who helped raise her. No. So as she's crying and upset about Rain's death, the goddess Nyaxia arrives to grant Uriah her wish. And in chapter 50, Uriah, she utters her wish. And I just want to show you the page, my written reaction for chapter 50 when she makes her wish. This is it. I was upset because you know what happens? Uriah gives away her wish and gives it to Rain instead. Everything this girl has been working towards, all the power she's wanted, thrown out the window. She gives her wish to Rain and wishes for Rain to have won the tournament. What? I swear to God, I wanted to throw my laptop across the room when I read that. Because it felt so utterly cheap and like a betrayal that once again in this type of story, the female main character basically gives up her power, in this case her wish, to please the male love interest. It's so disgustingly infuriating that this still keeps happening, and that basically meant that all the wishes, all the hopes and dreams she's been talking about this entire time, how she wants to be bonded to Vincent, to her dad, that she wants to reign alongside him, and she wants to become a powerful vampire so she can have an impact on the world around her. She wants to become independent and stronger. Forget about that. She's throwing out this wish for this rando guy she met 4 months ago maybe, and that she's been dating for like max 2 weeks. I'm speechless. Honestly, I was speechless. Well, in chapter 51, her wish is granted, Rain comes back to life, and now the goddess will grant his wish because it's like as if he has won. And he wishes for the power of the Raishan Nightborn King. He wants this power to be restored to him because, and no one saw this coming, Rain is the prince of the Raishan vampires. No, did not see this coming. I had no idea. Vincent acts upon this immediately, fights Rain, goes against him, and Vincent, you know, this super old, powerful vampire who's been alive for centuries, who literally was granted the power by a god so he can stay a powerful king. Yeah, Vincent gets his ass kicked immediately by Rain, and Rain commits regicide. Rain literally strikes Vincent once, he immediately defeats him, and then kills him in front of Uriah. And as Vincent dies, he finally says that he loves Uriah, and as he dies, a mark appears on Oriah. It's the mark of the king's heir, and it is revealed that Oriah is actually Vincent's for real biological daughter. Final part, part 7, Night. Has no interlude, first of all. Second of all, big reveal that we go in here with. Did not see this kind of reveal coming at all, because of course there has to be something special about a freaking main character. So in chapter 53, Rain says in front of everyone, and I know he's just pretending, but he's like, he says, I will marry Oriah, I will marry this bitch and then rape her in front of everyone so I can act our revenge upon her because, you know, Vincent and his previous kings, they did unspeakable things to our queen, so now I'm gonna marry this bitch and also rape the hell out of her. And everyone's like, whoa, yeah! And Oriah is like, what the fuck? And he takes her away. And it's basically like, I only said this, you know, to like save you from the crowd, because otherwise they wouldn't have gone with this whole thing. And then I start to question, what was his plan? What was Rain's plan? Because this can't have been his plan this entire time. Like, he cannot have known that Oriah would resurrect him if he died. When did he have time? First of all, when did he have time to organize this rebellion so that now all the rebel vampires are with him immediately upon him winning the tournament? Also, all the other stuff they did while they were in the tournament. And what was this man's plan to begin with if he hadn't won this contest? Like, what if he had just died and Oriah hadn't been there? Like, what if he had just died? And what if he couldn't have known that Oriah would use her wish? Like, what if Oriah would have been, as I wanted her to be, selfish enough to actually fulfill her own wish and Rain would have stayed dead? Well then, this is the most stupidest plan I've ever heard. In chapter 54, we're almost done. Chapter 54, Oriah wakes up in her room. And he says, hey, how you doing? I didn't mean those things. I'm not going to rape you. I only said those bad things to protect you. So my dad was the Rishan king. Big surprise, I know. And apparently, even though I'm a turned vampire, I still count as heir. Why? No idea. Because apparently before that, turned vampires were not allowed to be heirs. But now, they count. God knows why. So, what he says, and here we come to this whole plan thing again, he didn't have a plan B. He says he was ready to let the kingdom die for her. And I was like, oh, nice. All his allies and supporters must feel really great about that he would have basically thrown away this entire plan to overthrow the king and take back power for a rando girl he met a few weeks ago and has the hots for. This must be so reassuring to know if I were a rebel in this man's army. Wow. It's nice to know that this man has principles. Honestly. Now he says that, you know, he wants them to change the world together, that they should get married so they can, you know, basically be the vampire king and queen from the two different warring factions and can rule together and bring peace and change about the world. And I was like, why didn't you just use your wish? Why didn't you just use your wish for that? Because the goddess can grant you any wish. Why didn't you just wish for, I don't know, change and peace across the world or for the vampires? I don't know. Why is no one ever using these wishes in a useful way? Chapter 55. They get married. Hooray. Once Oriah is back home, she is contacted by Vincent's a military leader called Jasmine. She basically says, hey, Orion, we can get you out of here, but also we need your help because now you're basically our queen, and we need to talk about how this whole war thing is gonna go. And Orion basically just says, keep quiet, I'm gonna stay here and gather information, you don't have to save me yet. For chapter 56, for the final chapter, we're in the throne room. Orion and Rain have a bit of a conversation. Raya thinks about her feelings, and she basically comes to the conclusion that yes, she hates him, he's the worst person ever, but she also loves him dearly, and that she won't kill him anytime soon. And this is how Serpent and the Wings of Night ends. So here we go. This is the Serpent and the Wings of Night. Was this good? No. Was this an absolute garbage dumpster fire? Also no. Like, with this book, I can actually kind of understand why people would love it, and I can honestly kind of get why you would want to read this. You know, this is the kind of book I would recommend if you're like on the lookout for something that's like low key, easy to read, sort of like, you know, like a popcorn movie where you can like kind of switch your brain off a bit if you don't want to think about the plot holes. Like, I could kind of get, this is not offensively bad, it's just like very terribly mediocre. Like, this is never anything special or unique, but it has, I can see within it the potential to be actually interesting or good, which is more than I can say for some of the other books in this genre. The writing is perfectly fine. It is flawed. It has too many repetitions, too many M dashes, too much swearing, but you know, it's never outrageously terrible that I would say, what the fuck, how did anyone write this? It's not that. Like, this is actually readable. Like I said in the beginning of this, I read this quite quickly. Like, I read this within 1 week, which is quite fast for me. So it's perfectly fine in this regard. It lacks a lot. A lot of the things in this book are only surface level. The world building descriptions being the biggest part of this. Like, the world building never really dives into any intricate, super interesting details for this world. Everything is sort of vague and surface level, like just enough so you kind of know what's going on and where you are and what's happening. But as soon as you like start asking questions, this whole thing sort of falls apart. Like, we don't even know if the entire world is ruled by vampires or if it's just like this specific part of the world. Many questions about the tournament stay unanswered or like don't make sense. Like, why would you enter it with a friend? Why is a human allowed to enter this vampire tournament to begin with? Why do they have time off so they can go anywhere they please? How is Orion allowed to just like chat with Vincent, who keeps giving her cool things and information throughout the tournament? Like, how's any of that allowed? Like, there's so many questions surrounding this tournament where I'm like, how does any of this work? The same thing applies to the greater world, how the vampires work, because yeah, there's like some vampire clans thrown in there, but that's sort of it. Again, very surface level sort of history. However, I do see the potential there, like the vampire policies. I do see the potential at the end of the novel that this could get interesting in the second novel. There is a magic system in this that is chronically underdeveloped. Like, it's never explained as to where those magic powers actually come from and who has access to them. Like, can humans get the powers? Can only vampires get the powers? So how does it work for Orion? Because Orion is basically half vampire, half human. Like, there are no explanations to this. It's also sort of like hand wavy every time someone tries to explain it a little bit. But there's never really any greater detail to it, which is basically the general problem for this entire book and for this genre of popular books, or popular romantasy book as a whole, that I need more details, I need more descriptions, explain things to me, go into the world building, tell me how things are, how things work, tell me how things look. I want to actually imagine shit in your made-up world. The story is serviceable. It drags on. It's obviously inspired by Hunger Games with the Death Tournament. However, what this book and many other stories that have done the Death Tournament thing don't understand is that in Hunger Games, the Death Tournament isn't just there to be like, oh, there's cool and badass violence and there's gore and woo. Like, it's not there to be cool. The Death Tournament and the violence within the Hunger Games are there to make a statement, to make commentary on a political system, on a specific culture, on a specific kind of perception these people have in the world of Panem. That's what the violence and the Death Tournament in Hunger Games is about. But this book, like many others who try to do this Death Tournament thing, doesn't get that. And it's really just about, oh, it's so deadly, and people are dying left, right, and center, and our main character is never safe, and anything could happen to them at any time, even though the whole time you know they're safe. They're gonna be safe. It's fine. So this doesn't really work that well. I already mentioned that there are many elements throughout the tournament that are very, very similar to what happens in the Hunger Games books, like with the trials and everything, how the arena is built up. The trials themselves are very underwhelming. They're almost all the same. Like, it's always this same pattern of, oh, they're being thrown into an unknown arena. The arena can somehow change. They have to fight monsters and difficult terrain and each other and have to reach an end point, and then they win. And this pattern is repeated throughout every single trial. And there's 5 of these. 5 is too many, especially because all of them are sort of the same. You should have made it 3 trials, max 4. But for what we're getting, this just really dragged on at some point. Like, the second half has a lot of padding, which doesn't add anything to the world building or the character development. And we don't even spend that much time in the actual trials themselves. Like, all of these trials are done within 1 or 2 chapters. And these chapters aren't very long, which is also a reason why these trials feel so underwhelming, because they're just like dealt with so quickly. They're thrown into the arena, there's momentary confusion, but then Uriah like manages to fight her way through everything relatively okay. Then something happens to her. Rain has to save her, because Rain saves her so many times, and then she gets hurt or falls unconscious or something, but manages to win. That's exactly what happens, and it happens essentially 5 times. And given the fact Uriah is supposed to be like this big badass, Rain saves her many, many times. In general, I don't really get why Uriah is able to do the things she does, because it's said by her throughout the novel several times. Oh, I'm such a weak human. The vampires are so much more superior. They have better agility, they have better strength, they have heightened senses. But somehow she's able to like sneak up on vampires several times, just like kills them in the streets, does some cool shit, flips them, body slams them, defeats them easily. Like, how? I mean, in retrospect, you could argue, oh, it's because she's half vampire, but the book is not going for that. The book is not clever enough to do that. Let's be honest here. So it felt kind of ridiculous that she was able to do all this badass shit without ever having like any kind of clear advantage against these supposed superior vampire beings. Uriah as a character, especially as a protagonist, is alright. She's never like too annoying, but she's basically like every other popular romantasy protagonist, meaning she is a badass cool girl with a sword who gives zazzy commentary, doesn't want help from anyone until she meets the love interest. That's basically her entire character. And pinch of fantasy racism in this, of course, because she's human and that makes her weak. And basically this makes her like every other female protagonist in these types of books. Like, she's exactly like Jude in The Cruel Prince. She's like Violet in Fourth Wing. These characters are all the same. I want more variety. Same goes for the love interest, because Rain, while slightly nicer, is still the same, you know, dark, shadow adjacent power wielding, black leathers wearing guy who throws out one-liners and is really smooth and cool, but actually really complex deep down, and it is of course secretly somehow super duper special and powerful. It's the same. It's exactly the same again. And I ask you, are you not tired of this? I already talked about this at the beginning of this video, but I'm like, I know there are people out there who enjoy these books, and I kind of see why. But like, aren't you tired of basically reading the exact same thing over and over again? Like, I know there's a certain kind of comfort to like reading or consuming the same kind of story over and over and over again. But at a certain point, aren't you like, you want something else? Because, again, while I'm not the biggest romantasy fan, I know that this genre deserves better. You do not have to be satisfied with mediocrity. You deserve better than this. I refuse to believe that this, or Fourth Wing, or The Cruel Prince is the best thing the romantasy genre can produce. I refuse to believe that. There has to be some actually high quality writing out there, because regardless of which genre you prefer, you as a reader deserve quality writing, high quality writing. I feel like this is a good end point for this video. Final thoughts, it's okay. Honestly, if the premise interests you, give it a try, see if you enjoy it maybe, but don't expect too much. Like, it was alright. I didn't hate reading this, but it also wasn't great. At least with this, I see why people would enjoy it. And honestly, out of all the popular Booktok, Booktube books we've read so far, this one is arguably the best. So that's it for my review of The Serpent and the Wings of Night. Thank you so much for making it all the way through this video. If you have read the book yourself, please do tell me down in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on this book. And if you haven't read this, but still watched this entire video, thank you. And maybe you also have some thoughts on this book. In terms of what we're gonna read next, as soon as this video goes up, there will be a new poll where you can vote for the next book that you want me to read. I always try to choose books from different genres, so there's a bit of variety in there in case you want me to read something else for once. So go over to the community tab so you can go vote there for the next book. And as always, if you want to follow my reading journey, if you're curious as to know what I'm reading or how I review books, you can go check out my Goodreads or my Storygraph accounts. Links for those profiles are down in the description below. I write about all the books there that I read. I try to write reviews for every book. And in case you want to have some like little previews before I talk about the books here on the channel, you can go follow me on those websites and see what I think about books. But this is it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done it already. And I'll see all of you very soon. Goodbye.